The blizzard hit with such fury that Winona Wallace could barely see her own gloved hands gripping the reins, and when her faithful mare finally gave out beneath her, collapsing into the mounting snowdrifts with a pitiful cry, she knew with absolute certainty that she was going to die out here in the New Mexico Territory wilderness. It was December 1878, and she had been riding hard from Las Cruces for nearly 6 hours, trying to reach the neighboring Whitman Ranch to deliver urgent medicine for their sick daughter. But the storm had swept in from nowhere, transforming the familiar trail into a treacherous white maze. Her mare, a sturdy animal that had never failed her before, trembled violently in the snow, foam flecking her lips, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Winona threw herself from the saddle, landing knee-deep in powder, her legs already numb from the cold despite her heavy riding skirt and wool stockings. She knelt beside the horse, running her hands over the animal's heaving sides, feeling the unnatural heat radiating through the coat. Colic, perhaps, or simple exhaustion pushed too far. Either way, the mare was not getting up, and Winona was stranded with night falling fast and the temperature dropping with every passing minute. The medicine bag was strapped across her chest, the glass bottles pressing against her ribs through her layers of clothing. 8 years old, little Margaret Whitman, burning with scarlet fever, waiting for a cure that might never arrive now. Winona stood on shaking legs, squinting through the driving snow, trying to orient herself. She had no idea how far she had come or how far she still had to go. The landscape was unrecognizable, every landmark buried or obscured. Her father would be furious when he discovered she had ridden out despite his warnings about the weather, but she had not been able to sit idle knowing a child's life hung in the balance. Winona had always been stubborn, too headstrong for her own good. Her mother used to say before consumption took her 3 winters past. The wind shrieked across the open ground, cutting through her coat like knives. Winona pulled her scarf tighter around her face and forced herself to start walking, leaving her dying horse behind with whispered apologies and a final stroke along her velvet nose. Each step was an ordeal, her boots sinking deep, her skirts growing heavier with accumulated snow and ice. She had no real plan except to keep moving, to not surrender to the cold that wanted to pull her down into a final sleep. She managed perhaps a quarter mile before her legs gave out entirely. One moment she was upright, the next she was on her hands and knees, gasping, her lungs burning from the frigid air. She tried to rise and fell again. This was it then. This was how it ended. She thought of her father, who would blame himself. She thought of Margaret Whitman, who might die because Winona had failed. She thought of all the things she would never do, never see, never become. 22 years old and dying alone in a snowstorm. Then she heard hoofbeats. At first she thought she was hallucinating, but the sound grew louder, more distinct, accompanied by a man's voice calling out against the wind. Winona tried to shout back but managed only a weak croak. She waved one arm frantically, though her movements felt sluggish and uncoordinated. The rider materialized from the white curtain like an apparition, a tall figure on a massive dark horse, and when he saw her crumpled in the snow, he was off his mount in an instant, dropping to his knees beside her. "Good Lord, what are you doing out here?" His voice was deep and urgent, his hands already moving over her, checking for injuries. "Can you stand? Can you hear me?" "Medicine," Winona managed through chattering teeth. "Have to get to Whitman Ranch, little girl dying." She could not see his face clearly through the snow and her own blurred vision, but she felt his arms sliding beneath her, lifting her as though she weighed nothing. "Your horse?" he asked, collapsed, half-mile back, could not go on. He carried her to his horse, a huge bay gelding that stood rock-steady despite the storm. "Listen to me," he said, his face close to hers now. She caught an impression of sharp features, ice in his dark beard, intense eyes studying her with fierce concentration. "I am going to put you in the saddle, and then I am going to ride us both out of here. The Whitman place is another 4 miles at least. You will not make it on foot, and my horse cannot carry double that far in this snow. Do you understand? But the medicine, I will get you there. I give you my word." His voice carried absolute conviction, and Winona found herself believing him despite not knowing who he was or why he was out here himself. He lifted her into the saddle, then swung up behind her, one arm locking around her waist to hold her securely against his chest. His body was solid and warm even through their layers of clothing, and despite the impropriety of being held so intimately by a stranger, Winona was too cold and exhausted to care. They rode hard, the horse laboring through the deepening drifts while its rider guided it with expert hands. Winona drifted in and out of awareness, supported entirely by the stranger's arm and the saddle horn. Once she started to slip sideways and his grip tightened immediately. "I have got you," he said against her ear. "I will not let you fall." Those words anchored her, gave her something to hold onto besides the growing numbness in her extremities. She did not know how long they rode. Time became meaningless, measured only in the horse's labored breathing and the relentless howl of the wind. She was dimly aware of the stranger talking to her, asking her questions to keep her conscious, but she could not focus enough to answer coherently. Finally, blessedly, lights appeared through the snow. The Whitman ranch house, windows glowing yellow in the darkness. The stranger rode right up to the porch and dismounted, pulling Winona down into his arms again. The front door flew open and Thomas Whitman stood there, lamplight spilling out around him. "Xavier, what in God's name?" found her half frozen about 4 miles out. "She was bringing medicine for your daughter." The stranger, Xavier apparently, carried Winona up the steps and into the blessed warmth of the house. "Someone see to my horse, and there is another one collapsed out on the trail that will need retrieving come daylight. Mrs. Whitman appeared, her face haggard with worry and sleeplessness. "Margaret is getting worse. Dr. Brennan could not get through from town because of the storm." "Medicine," Winona said again, fumbling with the strap of her bag. "From Las Cruces, my father, he is the pharmacist. Got the telegram about your daughter yesterday." Xavier set her down gently in a chair by the fire, but when she tried to stand again, her legs would not support her. He caught her before she could fall, one hand at her back, the other gripping her arm. "Easy now. You have done your part. Let someone else take it from here." Mrs. Whitman had the medicine bag open, pulling out the carefully wrapped bottles. "This is it. This is what Dr. Brennan prescribed. Thomas, bring it up to her now, quickly." She turned back to Winona with tears streaming down her face. "You rode through that storm to bring this. You could have died." "Could not let her suffer," Winona said simply. "Not if I could help." The older woman embraced her, heedless of Winona's snow-soaked clothing. "You are an angel, a blessed angel." Then she hurried upstairs, leaving Winona alone with Xavier and Thomas. Thomas Whitman was already shrugging into his coat. "I will tend to your horse, Xavier. Get some dry clothes on yourself before you catch your death, too." He paused by Winona's chair. "We owe you both a debt we can never repay." After he went out into the storm, Xavier crouched in front of the fire, removing his gloves to warm his hands. Winona studied him properly for the first time. He was perhaps 28 or 30, with dark hair curling past his collar and a neatly trimmed beard framing a strong jaw. His eyes were a striking gray-green, and they regarded her with an intensity that made her breath catch. He was handsome in a rugged way, all sharp angles and weathered skin, clearly a man who spent most of his time outdoors. "Xavier," she said, testing the name. "I am Winona Wallace. Thank you for saving my life." "Xavier Wolcott," he replied, his mouth quirking slightly. "And you are welcome, though I have to say that was the most foolish and brave thing I have ever seen anyone do, riding out alone in weather like this. The storm came up so fast. It was clear when I left Las Cruces this morning." "This morning?" He looked incredulous. "You have been riding for what, 12 hours? About that. I had to stop twice to rest my horse and consult my map." Winona's teeth had stopped chattering now that she was warming up, but she was starting to feel the full extent of her exhaustion. Every muscle ached, and her feet were still numb blocks of ice. "What were you doing out there?" "I work the next ranch over, the Broken W. Was checking on some cattle in the north pasture when the storm hit. I was trying to make it back when I saw your tracks and then found you." He stood, unfolding to his full height, which was considerable. "We should get you out of those wet clothes before you take ill." A woman appeared from the kitchen, one of the Whitmans' hired help, carrying blankets and what looked like a nightgown. "Come with me, miss. We will get you sorted." Winona tried to stand again and swayed dangerously. Xavier was there instantly, steadying her. "I will carry you. You have carried me enough for one day. And I will carry you more if needed. You can barely stand." Without waiting for permission, he scooped her up again, following the housekeeper down a hallway to a small bedroom. He set Winona down on the bed with surprising gentleness, then retreated to the doorway. "Call if you need anything." After he left, the housekeeper helped Winona out of her frozen clothing, clucking her tongue at the state of her undergarments and the blue tinge to her skin. "Goodness gracious, child, you are minutes from freezing solid. Here into this nightdress and under these blankets with you." Once Winona was situated, wrapped in what felt like a dozen quilts with heated bricks at her feet, she should have fallen asleep immediately. Instead, she lay awake, listening to the muffled sounds of the household around her. Footsteps upstairs where Margaret lay sick. Low voices in the main room, the wind still howling outside, though it seemed to be lessening slightly. She kept thinking about Xavier Wolcott and the way he had looked at her, as though she were something precious and breakable. She thought about his arms around her in the saddle, the solidity of him, the calm certainty in his voice. "I will not let you fall." Men had courted Winona before, of course. She was considered pretty enough, with her auburn hair and green eyes, her tall, strong frame suited to ranch life. But her father's expectations were high, and none of the suitors had measured up in his estimation. Winona herself had never felt any particular spark with any of them. They were nice enough, but nice was not what she wanted. She wanted something more, though she had never been able to articulate exactly what that more might be. Perhaps it was foolish to feel anything at all for a man who had simply been in the right place at the right time, who had done what any decent person would do. Yet she found herself hoping she would see him again, talk to him more, learn about the man behind those watchful eyes. Sleep finally claimed her, deep and dreamless, her body surrendering to exhaustion. She woke to bright sunlight streaming through the window and the smell of coffee and bacon. For a moment she was disoriented, not recognizing the room, then memory flooded back. She sat up slowly, testing her limbs. Everything ached, but the dangerous cold was gone, replaced by the more manageable discomfort of overused muscles and minor frostbite. Someone had left clean clothes for her, including a dress that would be slightly too large but serviceable. Winona dressed carefully, her fingers still clumsy, and ventured out into the main room. Mrs. Whitman was there immediately, embracing her again. "You are awake. How do you feel?" "Sore but alive." "How is Margaret?" "The fever broke during the night." The woman's voice caught with emotion. She is sleeping peacefully now. The medicine you brought, it worked. You saved her life, Miss Wallace. The relief was dizzying. I am so glad, so very glad. Mr. Wolcott is still here. He stayed the night since the storm made it impossible to return to his ranch. He has been asking after you all morning. Mrs. Whitman smiled knowingly. Such a good man, and unmarried, I might add. Winona felt heat rise in her cheeks. I need to thank him properly. He is in the barn with Thomas. Go on, I will keep your breakfast warm. Winona wrapped herself in a borrowed coat and made her way across the cleared path to the barn. Inside, it was dim and warm, smelling of hay and horses and leather. She found Xavier in one of the stalls, brushing down his big bay gelding with long, practiced strokes. He looked up when she entered, and something flashed across his face, something warm and pleased. Winona, how are you feeling? Like I was trampled by a herd of cattle, but otherwise well. I wanted to thank you again. Properly this time, now that I am not half out of my mind with cold. He set down the brush and came to lean against the stall door. In the daylight, she could see him even more clearly. There was a thin scar along his left cheekbone, barely visible through his beard. His hands were strong and calloused, the hands of a working man. No thanks necessary. I did what anyone would do. Not anyone would have been out there to find me in the first place, and not everyone would have ridden through that storm to get me here. She stepped closer, drawn by something she could not name. You saved my life, Xavier Wolcott. That matters. He held her gaze, and the air between them seemed to thicken. Your horse did not make it, he said quietly. Thomas and I went out at first light to see if we could bring her in. She was already gone. I am sorry. Tears pricked Winona's eyes. She had known it was likely, but hearing it confirmed still hurt. She was a good mare, faithful. She deserved better than dying alone in the snow. She got you far enough that I could find you. Maybe that was all she had left to give. Xavier reached out as though to touch her arm, then seemed to think better of it, letting his hand fall back to his side. What will you do now? Thomas says the trail back to Las Cruces should be passable by tomorrow. Go home, I suppose. Face my father's wrath for riding out against his wishes. She managed a rueful smile. He means well, but he still sees me as a child who needs constant protection. Any father who has seen his daughter nearly freeze to death would be justified in his worry. Xavier paused. I could ride with you. Make sure you get back safely. The broken W is in the opposite direction from Las Cruces. You would be adding hours to your own journey. Then I will add hours. His voice was firm, brooking no argument. Besides, I want to make sure you actually make it home and do not go running off on any more mercy missions in dangerous weather. Despite herself, Winona laughed. Fair enough. I would welcome the company. They stood there, neither quite willing to walk away until Thomas appeared in the barn doorway. Breakfast is getting cold, you two. And Xavier, your foreman sent word that everything is fine at the ranch. They handled the storm well enough without you. Over breakfast, Winona learned more about Xavier. He had grown up in Texas, drifted west after the war, finally settling in New Mexico territory 5 years ago. He worked as the segundo, the second in command, at the Broken W, which was owned by an elderly widow who left most of the daily operations to him and the foreman. He had never married, though he dodged the question of why with a non-committal shrug. Never found the right woman, I suppose. Or she never found me. His eyes flicked to Winona as he said it, quick enough that she might have imagined the look if her heart had not started beating faster. Margaret was brought downstairs briefly, still pale and weak but smiling, her fever truly gone. She was a sweet child with her mother's blonde hair and her father's blue eyes. "Are you the lady who brought my medicine?" she asked Winona in a small voice. I am. Thank you. I felt so bad, like I was burning up from the inside, but I feel better now. Winona smoothed the girl's hair back from her forehead. I am glad, sweetheart. You rest and get strong again. The Whitmans insisted on lending Winona one of their horses for the journey back to Las Cruces, refusing to accept any argument. After what you did for us, it is the very least we can offer, Thomas said firmly. They set out late morning, the sky clear and blindingly blue, the storm's fury completely spent. The snow was deep but manageable, the horses picking their way carefully. Xavier rode beside her, close enough that they could talk easily but far enough to be proper. Not that propriety mattered much out here in the wilderness, Winona reflected. They were entirely alone, just the two of them and the vast white landscape. Tell me about Las Cruces, Xavier said. I have been through a few times but never stayed long. It is a good town. Growing, more people coming in every year. My father has run his pharmacy there for 15 years now, ever since we moved from St. Louis. He saw opportunity in the territory, thought he could make a better life for us. And has he? I think so. We have a comfortable house, enough money to live well. He has been trying to convince me to move back east, go to finishing school, find a proper husband among society types. She made a face. He wants better for me than frontier life. What do you want? The question surprised her with its directness. I want to matter, to do things that make a difference, like bringing that medicine to Margaret. I want to feel like my life has purpose beyond sitting in a parlor doing needlework and waiting for some man to decide my future. She glanced at him. Is that scandalous? It is honest. I respect that. Xavier was quiet for a moment, guiding his horse around a deep drift. My mother was like you, strong-willed, independent. My father tried to tame her, make her into something docile and conventional. It did not work. They fought constantly until she finally left when I was 12. I am sorry. That must have been hard. It was. But I learned something from watching them. You cannot change someone's fundamental nature, and you should not try. If you love someone, you love who they actually are, not who you wish they would be. He looked at her directly. Any man who would want you to be less than you are is a fool not worth your time. Winona's heart did something complicated in her chest. They had known each other barely 24 hours, most of that spent in crisis, yet she felt a connection to this man that defied logic. Perhaps it was simply gratitude and proximity, her mind trying to make something out of nothing. Yet she did not think so. There was something real here, something worth exploring. They stopped to rest the horses around midday, sharing the provisions Mrs. Whitman had packed. The sun was warm enough that some of the snow was beginning to melt, creating tiny streams that trickled across the ground. Xavier built a small fire to make coffee, working with the easy efficiency of someone who had done it 1,000 times. How much farther to Las Cruces? Winona asked, accepting a tin cup of the strong, hot brew. Another 3 hours, maybe 4 at this pace. We will make it well before dark. He settled on a fallen log, stretching out his long legs. Are you nervous about facing your father? A bit. He will be furious and relieved in equal measure. There will be shouting, probably some tears, definitely a lecture about responsibility and danger. She sipped her coffee. But he will come around eventually. He always does. He must love you very much to worry so. He does. I am all he has left since my mother died. I think he is terrified of losing me too. She watched the fire, the flames dancing and crackling. What about your family? Are you close to them? My father died in the war. I have 2 younger sisters back in Texas, both married with children now. We write occasionally, but we were never particularly close after our mother left. Xavier's expression was distant, lost in old memories. The ranch, the crew, they are my family now. The widow who owns the Broken W, Mrs. Henderson, She treats me like the son she never had. It is enough. Does it not get lonely sometimes? His eyes met hers, and she saw something vulnerable there, quickly masked. Sometimes, but loneliness is just part of life, is it not? Everyone feels it. Maybe we feel it because we are meant to find someone who makes it go away. Winona could not believe she was being so bold, but something about Xavier made her want to be honest, to say the things she normally kept locked inside. Maybe. He held her gaze for a long moment, then looked away, back to the fire. We should move on soon. Do not want your father worrying longer than necessary. They rode on through the afternoon, the landscape gradually becoming more familiar to Winona as they approached Las Cruces. They talked of inconsequential things and deeper matters alike, their conversation flowing easily. Xavier told her about breaking wild horses and weathering bad seasons, about the satisfaction of watching cattle thrive under good management. Winona described her work in her father's pharmacy, mixing medicines and helping customers, learning the properties of different herbs and compounds. You have a healer's heart, Xavier observed. That is a rare and valuable thing. My mother was the same way. Always tending to sick neighbors, bringing food to families in need. My father says I am just like her. Winona smiled at the memory. I hope that is true. She was the best person I ever knew. I am sure she would be proud of what you did yesterday. Riding through a storm to save a child's life, that takes courage most people do not have. Or it takes foolishness, as you said earlier. Can it not be both? His smile was warm, transforming his serious face into something lighter. Courage and foolishness often go hand in hand. As they crested the final hill and Las Cruces spread out below them, Winona felt an unexpected reluctance. Once they reached her father's house, this strange, suspended time with Xavier would end. He would ride back to his ranch, and she would return to her regular life, and they might never see each other again. The thought was surprisingly painful. Her father's house was on the edge of town, a comfortable two-story building with the pharmacy occupying the ground floor and their living quarters above. As they approached, the front door flew open and her father rushed out, his face a mixture of relief and fury. Winona Elizabeth Wallace, where in God's name have you been? I have been out of my mind with worry. Winona dismounted, and her father pulled her into a crushing embrace. He was a short, stocky man with graying hair and spectacles, his hands stained with the chemicals of his trade. I am sorry, Papa, I had to go. That little girl needed the medicine. And you nearly died delivering it. He pulled back, gripping her shoulders, his eyes behind his spectacles wet with tears. Thomas Whitman's boy rode in this morning to tell me what happened, how you were caught in the storm, how your horse collapsed. Do you have any idea what went through my mind? I know. I am sorry. But Margaret is alive and recovering because I went. That has to count for something. Her father seemed to notice Xavier for the first time. And you must be the man who saved her. Xavier Wolcott, is it? Yes, sir. Xavier had dismounted as well, standing a respectful distance away. I was fortunate enough to be in the right place at the right time. Then you have my eternal gratitude. Her father extended his hand and Xavier shook it firmly. Please come inside. Let me offer you a meal and a place to stay for the night. It is the least I can do. I appreciate the offer, sir, but I should be getting back to my ranch. I have been gone longer than I intended. Nonsense. It will be dark in a few hours and you have already ridden all day. Stay, rest, head out fresh in the morning. Her father's tone made it clear this was not really a request. Xavier glanced at Winona, something questioning in his expression. She gave a small nod and he smiled slightly. Then I accept, thank you. Dinner that evening was a lively affair despite the tension underlying it. Her father had clearly been preparing to lecture Winona extensively, but Xavier's presence made him rein in his anger. Instead, he asked Xavier about the broken W, about ranching and cattle and the challenges of frontier life. Winona helped their housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, serve the meal and then sat quietly, watching the two men interact. Her father was a good judge of character, and she could see him warming to Xavier as the evening progressed. There was an ease to Xavier's manner, a fundamental decency that showed in everything he said and did. He was respectful without being obsequious, confident without being arrogant. And when he looked at Winona, which was often, there was something in his eyes that made her pulse quicken. After dinner, her father excused himself to deal with some paperwork, leaving Winona and Xavier alone in the sitting room. She served coffee, her hands slightly unsteady. "Your father seems like a good man," Xavier said, accepting the cup. "He is. Overprotective, but his heart is in the right place." She settled in the chair across from him. "Thank you for staying. I know you are anxious to get back. I am where I want to be." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with unspoken meaning. Winona set down her cup, her heart racing. "Xavier, I know we barely know each other. I know this is probably just my gratitude making me feel things that are not real, but I have to say it anyway. I have never felt this way about anyone before. This pull, this sense that I have known you much longer than a day." He leaned forward, his eyes intense. "It is not just gratitude, Winona, I feel it too. From the moment I saw you in that snow, something inside me recognized something in you. It sounds insane, I know, but it is the truth. What do we do about it? I do not know. I live 4 hours away. Your father clearly has plans for you that do not involve a ranch hand with nothing but a decent salary and some savings." He ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "But I know I do not want to walk away and never see you again." "Then do not." Winona stood, moving to sit beside him on the settee. It was bold, perhaps too bold, but she was tired of being cautious. "Court me properly. Visit when you can. Let us see where this goes. And your father." "Let me handle my father." She reached out, taking his hand. It was the first time they had touched skin to skin, and the contact sent sparks through her. His fingers closed around hers, warm and strong. "I will do everything right," Xavier said quietly. "I will court you the way you deserve, with respect and patience. But Winona, you need to know that I am not a man who does anything halfway. If we start this, I am in it with my whole heart. That is all I want, your whole heart." She squeezed his hand. "And I will give you mine in return." He lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. It was chaste and proper, yet somehow more intimate than anything she had ever experienced. "Then we have an understanding." They sat together until they heard her father's footsteps on the stairs, then quickly separated, though not before her father caught a glimpse of them sitting close. He said nothing, but his eyebrows rose, and Winona knew they would be having a conversation about it later. Xavier left early the next morning before the sun was fully up. Winona walked him out to where his horse was saddled and waiting. In the gray pre-dawn light, he looked almost like a dream, something that might vanish when full daylight came. "When will I see you again?" she asked. "Soon. I will send word before I come so you can prepare your father." He reached out, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear. The gesture was tender and possessive at once. "Be patient with me. The ranch keeps me busy, but I will come as often as I can. I will be patient. Just do not make me wait too long." He smiled, that rare, full smile that transformed his face. "I will not." Then he mounted his horse, tipped his hat to her, and rode off into the breaking day. Her father was waiting when she came back inside. "Sit down, Winona. We need to talk." She sat, folding her hands in her lap, preparing for the lecture she knew was coming. "I am not blind," her father began. "I saw the way you two were looking at each other. I saw you holding hands in my sitting room." He paused, cleaning his spectacles on his vest. "Tell me the truth. Is this just gratitude and proximity, or is there something real between you?" "Something real, Papa. I know it seems fast, but I have never felt this way before. Never." He studied her for a long moment. "He seems like a decent man. Hardworking, honest, saved your life. Those are not small things." He sighed. "But he is not what I wanted for you. A segundo on a ranch, living hand to mouth. You could do better. You could marry a lawyer or a businessman, someone who could give you comfort and security." "I do not want a lawyer or a businessman. I want someone who sees me as I am and loves me for it. Someone who does not want to change me or mold me into something I am not." She leaned forward, earnest. "Xavier is that person, Papa. I know it in my bones. You have known him 2 days. Sometimes 2 days is enough." She took her father's hand. "I am not saying I am going to marry him tomorrow. I am just asking for your blessing to see where this goes. Let him court me properly. Get to know him yourself. If you still think he is wrong for me in a few months, I will listen to your concerns. But give us a chance." Her father was quiet for a long time, his pharmacist's mind clearly working through all the variables. Finally, he nodded. "All right. I will give him a chance. But Winona, if he hurts you or treats you with anything less than the utmost respect, I will see to it personally that he regrets it." She kissed his cheek. "Thank you, Papa. You will not regret this." "I hope not, daughter. I truly hope not." The next 2 weeks passed slowly for Winona, each day stretching endlessly as she waited for word from Xavier. She threw herself into work at the pharmacy, helping her father compound medicines and manage inventory. She visited Margaret Whitman, who was recovering beautifully, the fever nothing but a bad memory. She went to church and endured the whispers about her dramatic rescue, the story having spread through Las Cruces like wildfire, and she thought about Xavier constantly. His hands, his eyes, the way he had held her in the saddle. "I will not let you fall." She replayed their conversations, analyzing every word, every glance. Was she being foolish, pinning her hopes on a man she barely knew? But every time doubt crept in, she remembered the feeling of rightness she had experienced in his presence, the sense that she had found something precious and rare. Finally, on a cold January afternoon, a rider came with a letter. Her father handed it to her with a knowing look, and she took it upstairs to her room to read in private. The handwriting was strong and clear, the words direct. "Winona, forgive the delay in writing. The ranch has been chaotic, with calving season starting early and a fence line that needed complete rebuilding. I have been thinking about you constantly, wondering if you have thought of me at all, or if I am just a memory fading with each passing day. I would like to visit this Sunday if that is acceptable to you and your father. I know it is short notice, but I cannot wait any longer to see you. If Sunday does not work, tell me when would be better, and I will move heaven and earth to make it happen. Yours, Xavier Wolcott." Winona read the letter 3 times, her heart singing. She went downstairs and showed it to her father, who read it and nodded. "Sunday is fine. Tell him to plan on staying for dinner." She wrote back immediately, her response perhaps too eager but honest. "Yes, Sunday. Please come. I have thought of nothing but you since you left." Sunday dawned clear and cold. Winona changed her dress 3 times before settling on a deep blue wool that brought out her eyes. She helped Mrs. Chen prepare a proper dinner, roasting chicken and making fresh bread and a dried apple pie. Her father watched her nervous preparations with amusement. "You are going to wear a hole in the floor with all that pacing," he observed from his chair by the fireplace. "I cannot help it." What if he changed his mind? What if he does not come? He will come. That man rode through a blizzard to save you. I do not think anything short of an act of God would keep him away now. Xavier arrived mid-afternoon, riding his big bay gelding and leading a second horse loaded with supplies. He wore clean clothes, his beard neatly trimmed, his eyes searching for Winona the moment he dismounted. She wanted to run to him but forced herself to walk sedately, aware of her father watching from the window. "Xavier, I am so glad you came. I said I would." He smiled at her, then turned to unload something from the pack horse. "I brought gifts. Hope that is all right. You did not need to do that. I wanted to." He carried a heavy box to the door where her father met him. "Sir, I brought some things from the ranch, fresh beef, some preserves, Mrs. Henderson puts up, and a bottle of decent whiskey if you are inclined." Her father accepted the offerings with pleasure. "Very generous, thank you. Come in, come in. Get warm." The afternoon passed in conversation and quiet companionship. Xavier and her father discussed politics and economics, the challenges of running a business in the territory, the changes coming with increased settlement. Winona mostly listened, content to watch Xavier, to memorize the way he moved and spoke, the expressions that crossed his face. When they sat down to dinner, Xavier complimented every dish, clearly meaning it. Afterward, her father excused himself with an obvious lack of subtlety, leaving them alone in the sitting room again. "Your father is not very subtle," Xavier observed with amusement. "No, he is not. But I think he likes you." Winona poured coffee for them both. "How is the ranch?" "Busy but good. Calving season is always intense. We lost a few to the cold, but overall the herd is healthy." He accepted the coffee. "How have you been? Any more dangerous mercy missions?" "None. I have been the model of proper, boring behavior." She sat beside him, closer than propriety strictly allowed. "I missed you. I missed you too, every minute of every day." He set down his cup and turned to face her fully. "Winona, I need to know if this is real for you. If I am wasting my time hoping for something that can never be. It is real, more real than anything I have ever felt." She reached for his hand, lacing their fingers together. "I know it is fast. I know everyone will say we are rushing, but I have never been more certain of anything." "Good. Because I am in love with you." The words were simple and direct, utterly sincere. "I think I started falling the moment I saw you in that snow, so fierce and determined, even half frozen, and everything I have learned about you since has only made me more certain." Tears pricked Winona's eyes. "I love you too. I have been trying to talk myself out of it, telling myself it is too soon, too impossible, but I do. I love you, Xavier Wolcott." He cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs stroking her cheeks. "May I kiss you, please?" He leaned in slowly, giving her time to change her mind, then pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was gentle at first, almost tentative, then deepened as she responded, her hands coming up to grip his shoulders. It was her first real kiss, and it was everything she had imagined and more. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Xavier rested his forehead against hers. "I want to marry you," he said. "I know I should wait, court you properly for months, but I know my own heart, and I know I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Will you marry me, Winona Wallace?" Joy burst through her like sunlight. "Yes. Yes, absolutely yes." He kissed her again, longer this time, and she melted into him, letting herself feel the full force of her love and desire. When they heard her father's footsteps on the stairs, they reluctantly separated, though Xavier kept hold of her hand. Her father took one look at their faces and sighed. "I suppose I should ask if there is something you two want to tell me." "I want to marry your daughter, sir," Xavier said without preamble. "I know I am not what you envisioned for her. I do not have wealth or social standing, but I love her with everything I am, and I swear to you I will spend every day trying to make her happy." Her father looked at Winona. "And you want this, more than anything?" Well then, he sat down heavily in his chair. I suppose I cannot stand in the way of true love, can I? But I have conditions. You must be engaged for at least 6 months. I want to be sure this is not just infatuation that will burn out. And Winona will have a proper wedding, nothing rushed or scandalous. 6 months is fine, Xavier agreed readily. And I want to give her a proper wedding too. She deserves that. Her father extended his hand. Then you have my blessing. Welcome to the family, son. The engagement period was both wonderful and frustrating. Xavier visited every Sunday without fail, riding the 4 hours from the Broken W to spend the afternoon and evening with Winona and her father. They walked through Las Cruces together, attended church services, went on carefully chaperoned picnics when the weather allowed. Slowly, the town grew accustomed to seeing them together, and the initial gossip faded into acceptance. Winona visited the Broken W twice, staying in the main house with Mrs. Henderson, the ranch owner. The elderly woman was delighted by the engagement, having clearly wanted Xavier to find happiness for years. She showed Winona around the ranch, explaining the operations, making it clear that Winona would be welcomed into their little family. The ranch itself was beautiful, sprawling across a valley with mountains rising in the distance. The ranch house where Xavier lived was small but well built, just 3 rooms that he had built with his own hands. It is not much, he said, showing her around, clearly nervous. But I could expand it, add more rooms for children eventually. It is perfect, Winona assured him. I do not need a mansion. I just need you. They spent the afternoon walking the property, Xavier pointing out landmarks and explaining his plans for the future. He had saved most of his salary over the years, enough to buy his own land someday if he wanted. But he loved the Broken W, loved working with Mrs. Henderson, and was in no rush to leave. What about you? He asked as they sat on a hillside watching the sun set. Will you miss the pharmacy? Miss working with your father? I will miss him, but not the work. I can practice healing anywhere. And if we are this close to Las Cruces, I can visit often. She leaned against his shoulder and he wrapped his arm around her. I am not giving anything up, Xavier. I am gaining everything I want. I will make you happy, he promised. That is my only goal for the rest of my life. You already do. The wedding was planned for late June, when the weather would be warm and settled. Winona threw herself into preparations, sewing her own dress with help from Mrs. Chen and several women from town. It would be a simple ceremony at the church, followed by a celebration at her father's house. As spring turned to summer, Winona and Xavier grew ever closer. They talked about everything, their hopes and dreams and fears. They learned each other's moods and quirks, the little things that make up the fabric of a shared life. Xavier taught her to read the weather and track animals. Winona taught him about medicinal herbs and how to treat common injuries and illnesses. We make a good team, Xavier observed one Sunday afternoon as they worked together in her father's garden. The best team. Winona straightened, wiping dirt from her hands. Only 2 more months until the wedding. Are you nervous? About marrying you? Not even slightly. About being a good husband? Terrified. He grinned to show he was half joking. What if I disappoint you? Impossible. You could never disappoint me. She kissed him, quick and sweet. We will figure it out together. That is what marriage is, right? 2 people choosing each other every day, working through problems together. When did you get so wise? I have always been wise. You just did not notice. He laughed and pulled her close, holding her there in the warm sunshine, and Winona thought she had never been happier. The wedding day arrived hot and clear, the New Mexico sun blazing in a cloudless sky. Winona woke early, her stomach fluttering with nerves and excitement. Mrs. Chen helped her dress, lacing up the white gown they had labored over for months. It was simple but elegant, with lace at the collar and cuffs, the skirt flowing gracefully to the floor. "You look beautiful, child," Mrs. Chen said, tears in her eyes. "Your mother would be so proud." At the church, the pews were filled with friends and neighbors, faces Winona had known her whole life in Las Cruces. The Whitmans were there with Margaret, now fully recovered and bouncing with excitement. Mrs. Henderson sat in the front row, beaming. And at the altar, looking both nervous and joyful, stood Xavier in a new suit, his hair freshly cut, his eyes locked on the door as he waited for his bride. When Winona entered on her father's arm, she saw Xavier's face transform, saw the love there so clear and bright it brought tears to her eyes. They met at the altar, her father placing her hand in Xavier's, and the minister began the ceremony. The vows were traditional, but when Xavier spoke his promises, he looked only at her, his voice steady and sure. "I, Xavier Wolcott, take you, Winona Wallace, to be my wife. I promise to love you, honor you, and cherish you all the days of my life. I promise to be your partner, your friend, and your refuge. I will not let you fall." Those last words, an echo of that desperate day in the snow, undid her completely. She was crying as she spoke her own vows, promising to love and honor him, to stand by his side through whatever came. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the minister declared. "You may kiss your bride." Xavier pulled her close and kissed her thoroughly, to the cheers and applause of everyone gathered. When they broke apart, both laughing, Winona felt like her heart might burst with joy. The celebration at her father's house lasted well into the evening. There was food and music and dancing, Xavier spinning Winona around the cleared floor while their friends clapped along. Her father gave a toast, welcoming Xavier into the family officially, his voice catching with emotion. Mrs. Henderson toasted to their future happiness. And through it all, Xavier never left Winona's side, his hand always in hers, his eyes always finding her across the room. As night fell and the guests began to leave, Winona and Xavier said their goodbyes and rode out to the broken W together, to the small house that was now their home. Xavier carried her over the threshold, both of them laughing, then set her down gently in the middle of the main room. "Welcome home, Mrs. Wolcott," he said softly. "I like the sound of that." She wrapped her arms around his neck. I love you too, so much it terrifies me sometimes." He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. "I promise I will be a good husband to you. I know you will, just as I will be a good wife to you." She smiled up at him. "Now show me our bedroom, husband. It has been a very long day." They made love for the first time that night, learning each other with tenderness and passion, the awkwardness of inexperience giving way to pure connection. Afterward, lying tangled together in the darkness, Winona felt complete in a way she never had before. No regrets. Xavier asked, his fingers tracing patterns on her bare shoulder. "Not a single one." She pressed a kiss to his chest, right over his heart. "This is exactly where I am meant to be." Life at the broken W quickly found its rhythm. Winona adapted to ranch life with surprising ease, her strength and competence earning the respect of the ranch hands. She tended to injuries and illnesses among the crew, putting her healing knowledge to good use. She learned to manage the household, working alongside Mrs. Henderson and the ranch cook to keep everyone fed and comfortable. Xavier was everything she could have hoped for in a husband. He was patient and kind, passionate and devoted. He respected her opinions and consulted her on decisions. He made her laugh and held her when she cried. And he loved her with a fierce constancy that never wavered. Their first year of marriage flew by in a blur of hard work and happiness. They expanded the house, adding 2 more rooms in anticipation of future children. They survived a brutal winter and celebrated a successful spring calving season. They went into Las Cruces together once a month to visit her father and handle business. And every night they fell asleep in each other's arms, grateful for the unlikely circumstances that had brought them together. In the late autumn of their second year of marriage, Winona realized she was pregnant. She waited until she was certain before telling Xavier, choosing a quiet evening when they were alone after dinner. "I have something to tell you," she said, taking his hands in hers. He immediately looked concerned. "What is it? Are you all right?" "I am more than all right. I am pregnant. We are going to have a baby." The joy that flooded his face was beautiful to behold. He pulled her into his arms, holding her tight, his voice rough with emotion. "A baby. We are having a baby. Are you happy?" Happy does not begin to cover it. He pulled back to look at her, his hands framing her face. "You have given me everything, Winona, everything I never knew I needed, and now a child." He kissed her tenderly. "Thank you. Thank me. Xavier, you have given me just as much. You have given me a life I actually want to live, a partnership that challenges and fulfills me. You have given me love." She placed his hand on her still flat stomach. "And now we get to give that love to our child." The pregnancy progressed smoothly despite Winona's initial fears. She continued working around the ranch until she grew too large and ungainly, then focused her energy on preparing for the baby. Her father visited often, excited about becoming a grandfather, bringing gifts and advice. Mrs. Henderson was equally thrilled, knitting blankets and caps with determined focus. Xavier was simultaneously overjoyed and terrified. He worried constantly about Winona's health, about the dangers of childbirth, about being a good father. She reassured him as best she could, but she understood his fears. Women died in childbirth all the time out here, where doctors were scarce and complications could turn deadly fast. "I will be fine," she told him one night as they lay in bed, his hand resting protectively on her swollen belly. "I am strong and we have a good midwife, and I have you. I am not going anywhere, you better not. I would not survive losing you. You will not have to find out. I promise to love you all the days of my life, and I intend to keep that promise for a very long time." Their son was born on a warm May morning after a labor that lasted 12 hours. Xavier stayed with her the entire time despite the midwife's protests that it was not proper, holding Winona's hand, wiping her face with cool cloths, murmuring encouragement and love. When the baby finally emerged, squalling and red-faced and perfect, Xavier wept openly. "A boy," the midwife announced, handing the cleaned and swaddled infant to Winona. "Healthy lungs on him." Winona held her son, overwhelmed by love so fierce it was almost painful. He was tiny and perfect, with a shock of dark hair and Xavier's nose. When she looked up at her husband, she saw her own wonder reflected in his face. "He is beautiful," Xavier said, his voice choked. "You are both beautiful." "What should we name him?" Winona asked. They had discussed names endlessly over the past months, never quite settling on anything. But looking at her son now, Winona knew. "James, after my father's father, James Wallace Wolcott, James." Xavier reached out carefully, touching the baby's tiny hand, his finger immediately grasped by miniature fingers. "Hello, James. Welcome to the world." Her father arrived that evening, riding out despite his age and the late hour. He held his grandson with tears streaming down his face, calling him the most perfect child ever born. "He has your eyes, Winona, and Xavier's stubborn chin." He laughed through his tears. "He is going to be a handful." "I hope so," Winona said. "The world needs more determined, stubborn people willing to do hard things." The first year of James's life was exhausting and wonderful. He was indeed stubborn, fussy and demanding, sleeping poorly and eating constantly. but he was also sweet and curious, his eyes following everything with intense focus, his rare smiles like gifts. Xavier was a natural father despite his fears, patient and gentle, singing lullabies in Spanish that he remembered from his childhood, walking the floor with James at all hours. "You are good at this," Winona observed one night, watching Xavier rock their son. "I am terrified every moment that I am doing something wrong." "That just means you care. You are going to be a wonderful father." She came to stand beside him, peering down at James, who was finally sleeping. "He is lucky to have you. We both are." When James was 18 months old, Winona became pregnant again. This pregnancy was harder than the first, complicated by fatigue from chasing after an active toddler and persistent morning sickness. But she made it through, and their daughter was born on a snowy December afternoon, almost exactly 5 years after that fateful blizzard that had brought Winona and Xavier together. "Another strong set of lungs," the same midwife commented as the baby's cries filled the room. They named her Sarah, after Xavier's mother. She was smaller than James had been, with reddish hair like Winona's and Xavier's gray-green eyes. She was also calmer, content to sleep and eat and observe the world with solemn focus. "Two," Xavier said that night, sitting on the edge of the bed with Sarah in his arms while James slept in his small bed nearby. "We have 2 perfect, healthy children. How did we get so lucky? Not luck. We found each other when we needed each other most. Everything else just followed." Winona reached out to touch Sarah's downy head. "Our family. Our family," Xavier echoed, his voice full of wonder. The years passed in the way they do when life is full and busy. James grew into a serious, determined boy who loved the ranch and everything about it. He followed Xavier everywhere, learning to ride and rope and care for the cattle. Sarah was quieter, more bookish, content to sit with her grandfather in Las Cruces and learn about medicines and healing. They were different children, but equally loved, equally cherished. Winona's father passed away peacefully in his sleep when James was 8 and Sarah 6. It was not unexpected. He had been declining for months, but the grief was still sharp. He left the pharmacy to Winona, along with the house in Las Cruces. She and Xavier talked long into the night about what to do. "We could move to town," Xavier suggested. "Run the pharmacy together. The children would have better access to schooling. Or we could hire someone to manage it, keep it running in his memory but stay here." Winona looked around their bedroom at the house they had built together, the life they had made. "The children are happy here. I am happy here. Are you?" "Happier than I ever imagined possible." He took her hand. "Let us hire a manager, keep the pharmacy but stay on the ranch. This is our home." So that was what they did. The pharmacy continued to thrive under new management, providing income beyond Xavier's salary from the Broken W. They were not wealthy, but they were comfortable, able to provide well for their children and even save for the future. When James was 12 and Sarah 10, Mrs. Henderson passed away, leaving the Broken W to Xavier in recognition of his years of devoted service. It was unexpected and overwhelming, suddenly owning the land they had worked for so long. "She wanted us to have it," Xavier said, reading the will for the 3rd time. "She said we had made it our home, that we deserved to own it outright." Winona wiped away tears. "She was a good woman. I wish she could have lived to see the children grow up." She did see them grow. She knew James would be a rancher through and through, and she knew Sarah had your healing gift. "She told me once that she could die happy knowing the ranch would go on, that it would not be sold off or abandoned." Xavier set down the papers. "We will honor her by doing exactly that. We will keep this place thriving and pass it on to our children. And maybe their children after that. God willing." The transition to ownership brought new challenges and new freedoms. Xavier threw himself into improving the ranch, reinvesting the profits, expanding the herd. Winona continued her healing work, becoming known throughout the region as someone who could treat injuries and illnesses with skill and compassion. Together they built something lasting, something meaningful. James was 17 when he fell in love for the first time with the daughter of a neighboring rancher. She was a sweet girl named Emma, strong and capable, and Winona saw in their young romance an echo of her own story. Xavier was more skeptical, remembering his own youth and the foolishness that came with it, but even he had to admit that James was serious and mature beyond his years. "Should we be worried?" he asked Winona one night after James had ridden off to visit Emma yet again. "I do not think so. He is a good boy and she is a good girl. They will figure it out," Winona smiled. "Besides, you and I fell in love practically overnight. We are hardly in a position to tell them to slow down." "Fair point." Xavier pulled her close. "How is Sarah doing with her studies?" Their daughter had expressed interest in formal medical training, though opportunities for women were still limited. They were investigating options, including a women's medical college back east. "She is determined. I think she will find a way." Winona rested her head on Xavier's shoulder. "Our children are growing up. They are. Somehow that happened when we were not paying attention. You ever regret it? This life we chose?" Xavier turned to look at her fully, his eyes as intense as they had been that first day in the snow. "Not for a single second." "You are still the best thing that ever happened to me, Winona Wallace. Every day I wake up grateful that I found you when I did, that you said yes when I asked you to marry me, that we built this life together. I feel the same way." She kissed him, still feeling that spark after all these years. "I love you just as much as I did the day we married. More even. More is good. I will take more." He kissed her back, and for a moment they were not parents or ranch owners or pillars of the community. They were just two people who loved each other, who had chosen each other against all odds and never looked back. James married Emma when he was 19, and they built a house on the far edge of the ranch property. Within a year, they had a daughter of their own, tiny Elizabeth with her father's serious eyes and her mother's bright smile. Becoming grandparents was a revelation for both Winona and Xavier, a new depth of love they had not anticipated. "I thought I understood love," Xavier said, holding Elizabeth for the first time. "But this is something different, something huge." "Welcome to being a grandfather," Winona said with a laugh. "It only gets better from here." Sarah did eventually go east for medical training, spending 3 years at a women's college before returning to the territory with a medical degree and a fierce determination to serve the frontier communities that needed her most. She did not marry young like her brother, too focused on her career, but Winona was not worried. Sarah would find her path in her own time. On a cold December morning, nearly 30 years after that fateful blizzard, Winona woke early and slipped out of bed without waking Xavier. She pulled on a heavy robe and went to stand on the porch, watching the sun rise over the mountains. Snow covered the ground, pristine and beautiful, and for a moment she was transported back to that desperate day when her horse collapsed and her life changed forever. She heard Xavier come up behind her, felt his arms wrap around her waist, his chin resting on her shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" he asked softly. "That day in the snow, how scared I was, how certain I was going to die. Instead, you lived, we both did, and we got all of this." He gestured at the ranch, the mountains, the life they had built. "Not a bad trade. Not bad at all." She turned in his arms to face him. He was older now, his hair more gray than dark, lines carved deep around his eyes and mouth. But he was still Xavier, still the man who had carried her through a blizzard and promised not to let her fall. "I kept my promise, you know," he said, as though reading her thoughts. "I never let you fall. And I never let you fall either. That is what we do, we hold each other up." She reached up to touch his face, this beloved face she knew as well as her own. "Thank you for finding me. Thank you for loving me. Thank you for this life. Thank you for saying yes, for taking a chance on a ranch hand with nothing but a good horse and a decent heart." He kissed her sweet and slow. "I love you, Winona, still, always, forever. I love you too." They stood together watching the sun climb higher, burning off the frost, warming the frozen ground. Inside the house, they could hear James and Emma arriving with their 3 children now, Elizabeth joined by 2 younger brothers. Sarah was coming for dinner, bringing a young doctor she had been working with, someone she was clearly interested in even if she would not admit it yet. The family was growing, expanding, becoming something larger and more complex with each passing year. But at its heart were still just 2 people who had found each other in a storm, who had chosen love over fear, who had built something lasting and true. That evening, with the house full of children and grandchildren, with food and laughter and the warmth of family all around them, Xavier raised his glass. "A toast," he announced, waiting for everyone to quiet and lift their own glasses. "To the woman who rode through a blizzard to save a child she had never met. To the woman who said yes when I asked her to take a chance on me. To my wife, my partner, my love. To Winona." "To Winona," everyone echoed, and she felt tears prick her eyes. "And to Xavier," she added, her voice strong and clear. "Who carried me when I could not walk, who has carried me in 1,000 ways ever since, who never let me fall." "Who never let her fall," the family repeated, and then they drank, and the evening continued in joy and celebration. Later, after everyone had left or gone to bed, Winona and Xavier sat together by the fire, her head on his shoulder, his arm around her waist. The house was quiet, the only sounds the crackle of the flames and their own gentle breathing. "Do you remember what you said to me that first night at the Whitman Ranch?" Xavier asked suddenly. "After dinner, when we were alone, I said a lot of things. Which part? You said maybe we feel lonely because we are meant to find someone who makes it go away." He tilted his head to look at her. "You were right. I was lonely before you, even though I did not fully realize it, and I have not been lonely a single day since. Neither have I." She laced her fingers through his. "We were meant to find each other, Xavier. I believe that with everything in me. That storm, my horse collapsing, you being exactly where you needed to be to save me, it was all meant to be. I believe that too." They sat in comfortable silence for a while longer, 2 people who had lived a full life together and still had more ahead of them. There would be more grandchildren, maybe even great-grandchildren if they lived long enough. There would be challenges and sorrows, because that was the nature of life. But there would also be joy and love, and the satisfaction of knowing they had built something good. "Ready for bed?" Xavier asked eventually. "Ready." Winona stood, pulling him up with her. They walked hand in hand to their bedroom, the same room where their children had been born, where they had laughed and cried and loved for 3 decades. As they settled into bed, Xavier pulled Winona close, and she nestled against him with the ease of long practice. "Good night, my love," he murmured. "Good night," she whispered back. And as sleep claimed them both, Winona's last conscious thought was one of gratitude. Gratitude for that blizzard, for her collapsed horse, for Xavier appearing like an answer to a prayer she had not known to make. Gratitude for every moment since, for the life they had built brick by brick, choice by choice, day by day. She had set out that December morning simply trying to save a child's life, never imagining she would end up saving her own in the process. Never imagining she would find a love that would sustain her through everything, a partner who would walk beside her through all of life's storms. But that was exactly what had happened. And as she drifted into sleep, safe in her husband's arms, in the home they had made together, surrounded by the family they had created, Winona knew with absolute certainty that she would not change a single thing. Their story had started in snow and desperation, with a horse collapsing and a stranger's strong arms. It had grown into something beautiful and lasting, into a legacy that would continue long after they were gone. And at its core were 6 simple words that had proven to be a promise, a vow, and a prophecy all at once. I will not let you fall. He never had, and she never would. That was the simple truth that underpinned everything else, the foundation upon which they had built their entire life together. Outside, new snow began to fall, soft and silent, covering the ranch in a blanket of white. Inside, warm and safe, Xavier and Winona slept on, their hands still joined, their hearts still beating in sync after all these years. The story that had begun in a blizzard, with a young woman facing death and a cowboy who refused to let her surrender, had become something neither could have predicted. It had become a marriage, a family, a ranch, a legacy. It had become everything that mattered. And it had all started because Xavier Wolcott had made a promise in a snowstorm and spent the rest of his life keeping it. I will not let you fall. He never did.